Welcome to the Network for New Music, interviews with composers. We have a special installment for our upcoming series on Valentine's Day, which is called Love Stories, which will be broadcast on G-Town Radio on Sunday, February 14th at 4 p.m. And today we have Jerod Sommerfeldt. Welcome very much, Jerod.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here.
It's great to have you. So I just want to start, could you briefly introduce yourself to our audiences?
Sure. My name is Jerod, composer, electronic musician, and teacher, and I live in Potsdam, New York, which is about 2.5 hours north of Syracuse by the Canadian border, where I teach at SUNY Potsdam's Crane School of Music.
Excellent. Thank you, Jerod. And thank you again for being here and for participating in this collaboration, which combines your original music with spoken word. So I was wondering if you could just sort of give us your first reaction to when you received the text, and how did that inspire you to start creating a piece?
The inspiration, to be honest, was pretty easy. Working with text and then supplying an electronic music sort of background, we'll say, has been something that I've been doing a lot of lately. As I sort of was thinking about this project, I looked back and said, boy, my last like 4 or so projects have been doing exactly this. And one of my favorite things about it is just to try to stay out of the way as much as I can, but highlight things that I personally feel are significant to the story. So what I loved so much about the story of the Gants was just how common it all sounds. You meet someone in history class, you start having conversations, you date on and off, and then suddenly, that can turn into something, marriage, much bigger. And it was a really sort of beautiful love story to work through and highlight. So in a lot of moments in the music, I was trying to just pick out those specific moments that I thought were significant to their story and see if musically I could subtly highlight them in some way.
I really like that idea, especially because when you were describing the story, you said how it can suddenly turn into something. And your piece almost begins rather suddenly with a bass drum. Could you tell us about that and the significance of that to your piece?
Yeah, as I was, I listened to the story over and over and over, and one thing that came to mind for me was this idea of their two heartbeats, Marquita's heartbeat and Stevens, and how they can line up and can't. So I tried to specifically start with this big bass drum sound that's like sort of reminiscent of a heartbeat. And then another piano kind of attack comes in, which is another heartbeat. And they kind of oscillate around and then line up at times, much like, I like to think that, your significant other, there are times where you're just in tune in that way and things do sync up.
That's great. And so for audiences who don't know, could you explain what oscillation means?
Just to go in and out of a state. And so I like to think of it, I tell my students, is like if you're at a stoplight and you're turning left and the car in front of you is turning left, there's that beautiful moment where your blinkers kind of line up, but then they get off a little bit and then they rotate around their timings and then they get back on again. And that's kind of how I view that particular sense of oscillation with these rhythms as they go throughout.
And you also use, even though this is for electronics and it is digital, you do use tonality. You do reference intervals, and that is significant too.
It is, and there was something about their story that really seemed to just warrant that, because I'll be honest, it's not a sound world that I normally go to. But I mentioned earlier the idea of the two rhythmic tropes being heartbeats. I also used the notes that sort of collectively come in over time. I used very close intervals, major seconds they're called, and so they're pretty adjacent on like a keyboard or a piano. So they're close, like these two are close. And I thought that might be a nice motive to start building harmony from. So what listeners will hear in this piece is, the establishment of this rhythmic idea, a close interval to start, and then that sort of grows and coalesces into, once they get married, much bigger, broader, richer harmonies.
And for those that are more technically inclined, could you tell us a little bit about your home studio and what you do, like what your home studio is like, and what hardware, software you use to create this piece?
Sure. I'll be honest. I was pretty nervous about mixing this one because just due to COVID, I'm not able to access our campus or our studio at school. So I have a setup here as best I can to recreate. I got my monitors and keyboards and everything so that I can work down here. But the room isn't the ideal space to work in for mixing. So I did the best I could in that respect. But more technically speaking, I draw a lot of sonic inspiration from analog instruments now. So I have modular synthesizers that I patch sounds to. I can also bring in outside sounds into the synthesizer and affect them with some of our more common audio effects like reverb and delay and others, and modulation. And then I track that all in my audio workstation. And for DAW users out there, there's so many that you can use. And I do use quite a few, but my primary ones are Reaper, and this was entirely done in Reason. And the reason, didn't mean the pun right there. The reason that I used Reason was specifically for some of its software instruments, because as I was working on the piece, I knew that I wanted to have elements of melody and harmony. And the software instruments available to it allowed me to create those pretty easily using a MIDI protocol, and then blend those with the sounds that I had created in the synthesizer and others. So you'll hear a lot of complementary sounds, for example. There's some melodic ideas, but then in the background, you'll hear other cascading sort of reminiscences of those melodies and notes and things like that, which Reason really allowed me to do with some facility, which was exciting.
Well, it's lovely, melodic and ambient, and I think I can't wait for the audiences to hear it. Because this is going to be broadcast on a special event for Valentine's Day, it leads me to ask, what are you doing for Valentine's Day?
Oh my goodness. My wife and I, we've been married. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. October 2010 was when we were married. And we were talking about how we have yet to go out together for quite a while because of COVID. We've literally just been here since March. And so in a perfect world, a post-COVID world, we would probably get a babysitter, have dinner together at this restaurant nearby called Jake's that we absolutely love. But we'll probably cook here, and family night. We've got, our son Foster, who's 4. He is just our whole entire world. And, really, we've been kind of really spoiled and lucky to have this time as a family together, being together all the time. And so Valentine's Day will be another opportunity for us to just be grateful for that family time and to be together and think about sort of how far we've come in our own story, and our own and the things that we have to look forward to as well.
And Jerod, we're grateful to have you on this project. And thank you again for your contribution and for taking the time to speak with me today.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to do this and to be a part of this project. And I'm really looking forward to hearing all of the other works and stories.
Thanks, Jerod. Take care.
You too. Take care.